So while they're getting the questions and bringing them forward, I do want to start with one that came in online. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a blog page called Acts of Ministers, and you can submit questions online. This one actually came in this week. So I'll start with this while we get another one. It says, I recently began applying some Unity teachings to my life, and I'm enjoying the process. However, I do have a problem with the law of attraction. I find myself feeling frustrated with new thought authors who so flippantly tout this law as the reason people suffer misfortune and abuse. Is there some other way to interpret the law of attraction? So let me start with a little, I guess, brief explanation as my understanding of the law of attraction. You might be familiar with it if you've heard about The Secret. You guys remember The Secret a few years back? The book and movie/documentary came out, and it talked about how basically with the power of our thinking and intention, we can attract to our lives the fabulous things that we want. The cars, the houses, the life experiences, purely through thinking and a set of intention. We should vision boards and all this kind of stuff. And part of the, I would say, the good news, bad news scenario of the law of attraction is that there's also this idea that if there is some misfortune or something happening in your life, that you attracted it. It was your thinking that made it happen. So it's kind of like, two sides of the same coin. And unfortunately, many people, when they hear it this way, I guess the safest way to say is they get down on themselves, they beat themselves up. My life is looking pretty miserable right now. I must have done this through my thinking. And they do a lot of self-shaming and self-blaming. What I like to call metaphysical malpractice on themselves for that reason. So the question is, there a different way to interpret the law of attraction? Yes, there is. In Unity, we have lots of teachings. We have 5 basic principles. The third one says we create our experiences through the power of our thoughts, which is kind of the same core of the law of attraction. Sometimes we simply paraphrase this as thoughts held in mind produced after their kind. This is a gross simplification of this idea, of this principle. What I like to say is that through the power of our thinking, through the power of our thoughts, through the power of our beliefs, through the power of what we hold in our consciousness, we have the ability to respond to anything that happens in our life and thus create the experience that we see ourselves or want to have ourselves in during it. I use this third principle as more of a principle of responsibility, the ability to respond, not a principle of blame and causality. Okay, I'll say that again. It's a principle of responsibility, our ability to respond to what shows up in our life, not a principle of blame and causality. Okay, so here's an example.
Sure.
We bought a car yesterday. Thank you. People like cars. But we bought a car yesterday, and then we have a friend visiting from out of town, so we got the new car, we put him in the new car, we moved and on, then we went to dinner. And as we were leaving the restaurant, driving through a parking lot, someone who, wait, don't make up the end of the story yet. Wow! As we were coming out the parking lot, someone was like shooting, it was like pulled right in front of us as though we weren't there. Normal DC driving. And I mentioned, you know what? That was even scarier because we were in the new car. Now, if that car had happened to hit us, did we cause that? No, I don't believe we did. The reason why I don't believe we did is because that person driving the other car, he's thinking, he's driving, he's doing his own thing. I'm not in his head. I am not in his consciousness. I am not creating that experience for him. Now, should we have gotten an accident, how are we going to respond? What are we going to choose to do? How are we going to choose to interact with this person? Are we going to get out screaming and yelling at this person, you just hit a brand new car? Or are we going to jump up with an open heart and compassion? Are you okay? What's going on? He may have been so distracted by some trauma in his life that he's not fully present. So our ability to respond is what that third principle is all about. And I believe that every choice that we make, and from the place and the consciousness with which we make all our choices in life, lead to the next scenario, the next scenario, the next scenario. For all we know, that guy might have hit us, we might have gotten out kindly, turns out he might be the second cousin of Bill Gates and they give us $2 million. I don't know, I'm just making up scenarios. But you get what I'm saying. You just never know. So that's how I interpret the law of attraction. My ability to respond to my life and thus create the experience I want, and thus I am guided and led to other situations that continue to support.
That was a lovely mini sermon.
Thank you. I'll try to keep my answers brief.
Here's a question. I like this. Is there a spiritual teaching or concept that you are struggling with? You get to answer that too, okay?
I thought we were taking turns.
I'll let you handle the intellectuals. Is there a spiritual teaching or concept you are struggling with? Is there a spiritual teaching concept that you are working with that in our spiritual practice as an individual? I know one that's up for me as we've been in a healing energy. For those of you perhaps that this is your first Sunday, back in March, I got very, very clear guidance that we were to spend time this summer focusing on healing. Well, be careful what you ask for, right? And it's interesting, someone said, we've done like 4 Sundays of healing. Can we be done? I said, yeah, I agree with you. And I remember speaking to the board in July. I was like, I think we're going to just fade off on this healing thing. The board, literally, our 6 board members, they were like, no. The healing is just starting. Because they could see. Because part of our board's commitment is to be aware and alert and receptive and in touch with different aspects of our ministry. And so they began speaking to me individually about, this person's spoken to me about their healing, and this person's spoken about their healing. So the healing concept I've really worked with this summer is from the 4 Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz, many years ago, kind of came on the scene. He's got many books. But there's those 4 core concepts, and one of them is, don't take it personally. So as I focus on healing parts of myself, that's been a teaching that's been very important for me to wake up to in any moment or conversation or story I'm making up in my mind. Don't take it personally. Don't take what's happening outside of me, and don't take what that person said. Don't take what that action was. Don't take the car pulling out in front of me as a personal affront. It's not. How about you?
Okay. One of our spiritual teachers that Jennifer's mentioned, Andrew Weiss, he was here some time ago. He talks about compassion, and he talks about the first stage in compassion is recognizing yourself in the situation or the other person for which you're attempting to hold compassion for. Recognizing that if there's something out there that you don't like, or someone that you don't like, or there's something you want to change, that in order to get to that open-hearted place, you first recognize yourself in it. Recognize that there's a piece of you inside, a piece of inside of you that is resonating with it. That's the one I'm struggling with. I see situations and I see the actions of others, and often it is a struggle to say, where's that piece of me? Where's maybe that? Is there such a violent piece within me? Is there such a greedy piece within me? When we look at sometimes, the corporate theft that happens, when we look at the violence in other parts of the world, in our own country, in our own city, is there a violent piece of me as well? Is there a piece of me that is feeling such desperation that I need to act in such a way. And when I can sit and truly go in, and more often than not, almost every time, if I'm honest, I can say yes, that there is that piece of me. And when I can recognize that, I can be a lot more compassionate and maybe understanding what led another person to their actions. Not excusing the actions, not saying the actions were okay, but recognizing that there's always a deeper story, a deeper emotion, a deeper feeling. And as a fellow human being, those are within me as well. But trust me, it's not my first reaction, or my second, or often not even my third. Yeah. Here's another question that came in. It says, and this is kind of related to, I think the answer I just gave is a little related to this one. If we're the Spirit of God, then shouldn't all our thoughts, I think that should be divinely inspired? If so, why so much attention to the one divinely inspired word called the Bible? So I think that's a two-parter. I get to answer that one? Emily Cady, longtime Unity writer, her most famous work is Lessons in Truth. She speaks about our divine self and our, I guess, human self. The divine, she calls it the individual, and the, what's the other one?
Personality.
Personality, there we go.
Individuality.
Individuality is the divine self of us, and the personality, or the human, some would say the ego side of us. And some people see these as literally two selves of us, kind of in this cosmic struggle. I like to think of it more as, we on this spectrum of self of who we are. But the truth of the matter is, in this reality, we're human beings. We have our thoughts, we have our experiences, we have our memories, our personalities, or forms, from our childhood experiences. That's how we learn to see and deal with the world. And that's how we operate by default. And then we get a bit older and we realize, you know what, there's more to us than just our memories and how we've learned to deal with the world. There's a deeper spiritual, divine part of us. And life happens to, in my experience, work a lot better when we come from that place. But we've got all this embedded human reaction stuff in us. So it comes down to a matter of remembering that, and when we're in different situations, remembering, are we going to choose from the human side of us that's learned to be in the world, or are we going to choose from the divine of us that says there's more going on here? Did you want to speak to that, or?
I'm ready to move on to my next question.
But wait, that asks the Bible question. So briefly, the Bible question, and there were some other questions related to the Bible, the role it plays in unity,
Sure.
About the reading the Bible and interpreting the Bible, and so this question was phrased: why do we look to the Bible? In unity, we see the Bible as one of many spiritual, mystical writings. We interpret the Bible metaphysically. You may have heard this before. Metaphysically simply meaning we do not interpret the Bible literally. How unity approaches the Bible is that every character in the Bible, every story in the Bible, every place in the Bible, everything that happens in the Bible is a reflection of our own spiritual journey. So we can look at a story and, pick one at random. Story of David and Goliath. Everyone kind of knows that story about David and Goliath. I've heard about it. It's such a well-known story that it's made its way into popular culture. We have big corporations fight against the little mom-and-pop store. We say it's a David and Goliath battle. So when we look at the David and Goliath scenario, we ask ourselves, when are we the David showing up in our lives? When are we the Goliath showing up in our lives? When are we the two, warring kingdoms and such and such? So that's kind of how we approach the Bible. The reason why it's mainly the Bible in unity is that unity's roots do go back to, or are connected with Christianity. So that's our connection to the Bible.
Period. Great. I got another question, so we're going to jump in another direction. And so we're both going to answer this because we'll have two different answers. What is your take on enlisting spirit beings, archangels, angels, spirit guides as helpers on your spiritual journey? Would you like to go first?
Yes, we will have two different answers.
Yes. Amen. Aren't we grateful? Bring them on. What is your take on enlisting spiritual beings? Spirit beings, archangels, angels, spirit guides. Here's my experience, and I am not speaking as a unity expert. I'm speaking as a person on the spiritual journey. There is a realm of unseen that is huge. We don't know. We don't know what's in the realm of the unseen. I know that I know that I know that I know that I am not here alone. And on positive days, I look out into the world and I go, I'm not alone. This person's with me. This organization I'm a part of. On not so positive days, I look out in the world and go, I'm not any part of any of that. And when I have those moments of thinking I'm not part of any of that, it anchors me to remember there's a whole field of unseen. And I believe when we are open and receptive in a healthy, emotionally sound way, we can invite that assistance. We can trust that assistance. And we can look at where there are those synchronistic moments in life. And if we choose to know that it's part of the unseen, acting in, with, co-creating around and in us, why not have that perspective?
I guess it's my turn. While I answer, and if you want to look at those and see if you want to address those next. I'm a little more the healthy skeptic side of things. So, Unity's first principle says there's one power, there's one presence, and we call it God. Unity's second principle says that since we are created in that image, that is also who we are at our core. That our very essence is also that one power, that one presence. In other words, all that is God, all that is fully present at the point in each and every one of us. That being said, I believe then all that I need to fully unfold in my spirituality and to fully be in this world, I already have. So I'm not saying that I don't believe that there are angels and other beings out there. I believe that I have all I have within, and also my hesitation is sometimes we place a lot of our belief and power on these entities and these angels, and we rely on them more than we rely on our own inner divine guidance. So it's one of those tricky situations that I personally, just me personally, would rather not get myself into.
You gone to meddling now.
That's just me. What works for you works for you. So I've been with Jennifer. I've seen firsthand how her connection and love of the angel relationship has served her well, and has been a source of inspiration and for her and upliftment for her. Don't do anything for me, but there's enough room for us all. At all levels.
And another day you'll tell the story of when we invited the angels into our house in North Carolina and left food for them. Okay. Because I'm just like, we need to start this conversation a little earlier.
That was one of my smile and nod experiences. Okay. Food out for the angels.
It got us here.
You can argue what got us here.
I think we have time for 2 short answers. There are a lot of questions up here. Great questions. Thank you for your questions. I think the one that I will address, that's a valuable question. It says, I'm worried about Reverend Jennifer. Is she okay? For those of you that this is your first time, You're like, what are they talking about? I've been taking some extra leave, if you will, over the last several weeks. One of the things I did was I went on spiritual retreat, and the guidance really was stop, slow down, be quiet. I'm like, well, yeah, that's lovely. I got 5 days. Well, we'll do that. And then I get to get going. And so what I've discovered is that probably in my experience as a minister, while I love ministry very, very much, I've kind of had a relapse, if you will. I've been very public over the last 2 years that overachievement, what's a word I don't care for, workaholism is a real growth point. That's excellent. It's a real growth point for me, and I have realized that I've stepped back into that. And so over-functioning is the word that has presented itself for me. And so a couple things I've done is we've shifted some of the responsibilities of the day-to-day running with the church to Ogun, and I have really given myself space to do some of that stopping, that being, because I have had some pretty clear signs of burning the candle at both ends is not sustainable. And so I've been making a choice to be sustainable. And so yes, I am okay. You don't need to come through the receiving line and ask if I have a terminal diagnosis, because the answer is still no. Have I worked with doctors? Yes. And I have to stop. I have to go back to the being essence that we flippantly talk about in Unity. It's not about doing, it's about being. I like to do. That's what I say to the doctors. I like to do. And I even manifested a job I like to do. So spending more time being, focusing on that. And what I'm finding is as I do that, there is an opening in my awareness, in my consciousness, and in my creativity that is really beautiful. And it's serving me in simple ways to simply have an aha idea and go, oh, I can't wait to implement that at church. And then I call the church and I call the staff, and they're like, we're busy with the everyday things that are going on here. Thank you for your new idea. We'll talk about that when you get back. So, yes, I'm okay. Thank you for your continued prayers of knowing that we are all in a healing, uplifting experience that's bringing us into greater expression of our wholeness.
So this is a great follow-up question to what she just says. And the handwriting's a little difficult. Where do we need to evolve our, I'm going to guess that word spirituality, to include emotional healing and justice? Are you familiar with the idea of the spiritual bypass? You thought it seems to skip emotions and social justice and outward service. So to speak about the emotions first, in some cases, yes. In some cases, when we don't interpret and understand our teachings properly, we get this idea that we ignore how we feel and just, jump into the meditated or jump into the whatever.
Plow forward. Just keep going.
Don't pay attention to our emotions, to our mental red flags, to our physical red flags. But they are indicators. They are indicators that something is amiss. And it is something that I believe we can approach with a spiritual practice. But what is it exactly that we are applying our spiritual practice to? Is it something yes, emotional? So my answer is yes, let's use our emotions. Let's use our mental indicators. Let's use all these things to show that is our body's way of saying there's something amiss on a very deep level. And then when we can attune ourselves to what that is, then yes, let's just apply a spiritual teaching or a spiritual principle or whatever is the best solution at that time. So no, let's not ignore the emotions. In terms of social justice and service, being in service is, I think, how we love one another. Being in service is how we show up as the hands and the feet of God. So I entirely support that. Unity for quite some time has had the reputation of we're the navel gazers. We like to sit and meditate, just be in the being, and not necessarily the doing that Jennifer spoke about. We often get confused with Unitarians who are, thank you, who sometimes have the flip side reputation. They're all about being in action and social justice, and maybe not so much about being in the stillness. And I think we need the both. I think we need to sit in the stillness to really ask ourselves what is ours to do, to be in action, to bring healing, love, and service, to be the hands and feet of God in this world. And then when we figure out what that is, we get up and go do it. We put feet to our faith. We live out the fifth unity principle, which is it's not enough to know these things, we got to live them. And we live them by being in service. So it happens that we have a lot of service opportunities here. So check out your bulletins and see what they are. One of them is donated to the community support services. There's information in your bulletin. The stuff's that's sitting up there like quadruple or quintuple. Is that a word? Multiplied by 5. Quintupled. There you go. Since last week. So we're all really, really grateful for those of you who brought in stuff. That's love in action. That's being in sacred service. And that's how we demonstrate God in this world.
Last question.
Yes.
What is the truth that you know?
Oh, goodness. Is that for me or for them? What is the truth that I know?
Would you like a moment and I'll answer it since I came up with the question? So here's the truth that I know, because it's a truth about you. So the truth that I know is that there is a power and a presence that lives within each and every one of us in this room. And we simply come back on Sunday morning to remember it and to see it in another person's eyes. I used to work for Fairfax County Public Schools, and while I worked at a very evolved portion of public education, there were days where I couldn't see God in anything that happened and even in anything that I did. But I knew if I went to Wednesday night meditation, or I went to a Thursday night class, or I went to Sunday morning service, there would be some aspect of myself, that higher self, that I would see presenced by someone else in the community. So the truth that I know is that there is power in spiritual community, and that each and every one of us, whether it's our first day or our 4,000th time coming to Unity, we make up that tapestry of Unity of Gaithersburg, a unique, unrepeatable spiritual community that is here to shine its light of wholeness and be a reflection of the love that is the truth that lives in the world. Your turn.
That I'm not going to follow that answer. There's nothing to be said after that.
What a smart man.